Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Step Outside podcast from the Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries at the University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture. I'm your host, Christy Keel-Blackman. Today, I would like to welcome Kyler Hecke to our podcast. Kyler is a PhD student here in our department, and today we're going to talk about his research on the sickle darter. Welcome, Kyler.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
Thanks for being here. So let's jump in, and if you would just introduce us on a kind of a basic level to your dissertation research.
Yeah, so I'm a third-year PhD student. Kind of my dissertation research encompasses a lot of different things. And so when I first got here, Dr. Alford, my advisor, and I, we wanted to assess historical distributions of both fish and mussels of greatest conservation need in the Clinch River drainage. It's a really diverse drainage as far as the number of species of both mussels and fish that occur there. So we acquired a lot of historical distribution data sets, and we wanted to figure out how distributions of these species have changed over time and kind of what environmental factors have influenced the distributions of these species. And another part is we're assessing the current distribution of the sickle darter. It is a species only found in the upper Tennessee River drainage in Tennessee, Virginia, and North Carolina. So we assessed that, but also we kind of did a little side project where we're tracking the small scale movement of this species to try to figure out if it actually stays in the same kind of habitat year round. But in short, that's pretty much my dissertation research.
You sent me a research paper ahead of time so that I could review it, and I looked over that. So why are we looking at the sickle darter specifically? Why is that one species so important?
So like I just said, it's only found in the upper Tennessee River drainage, but ultimately nobody's ever assessed its actual distribution. In the past 100 years, kind of here and there, in other, standard sampling programs by, TWRA or TBA, it has been observed, and, you just put down lat long of where it occurred, but that's it. So we kind of had, maybe a general idea of where it occurred, but we didn't actually know, does it actually occur in all these other sites like the ones we find them then. Also, because of that, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has petitioned it to be listed as potentially federally threatened or endangered because we've realized that historically where it was observed, say maybe 100 years ago, it no longer does.
Okay.
So we're seeing kind of a reduction in its distribution. So it's important that we currently figure out where it occurs so we can try to figure out what the best management decision is to help recover that species and figure out also if it actually needs to be listed as federally threatened or endangered.
Okay. So is it safe to say that the sickle darter is not the only fish of concern? This is just one species that you're looking at?
Yeah, it's not the only one. There are a lot of, not only just darters, but a lot of fish species, that don't get necessarily the attention they need to understand if there are changes in their species status or their distribution. The grant we got was a state wildlife grant, and state wildlife grants mainly focus on, these species of greatest conservation need to try to figure out if there's been drastic changes in their distribution or their species status, and try to also help them based off the research done determine what kind of conservation measure needs to be done to help them by ring reductions or habitat improvement work.
Would you be working with reintroduction projects eventually?
I'm doing an ecological niche model based off the distribution data we're collecting for sickle darters. And basically what that is predicting is within the upper Tennessee River drainage, which stream reaches have the highest probability of suitable habitat for sickle darters. So how that model and the data I'm collecting are going to be utilized are, one, you got to ground truth the model. All right, so there's a high probability of suitable habitat for sickle darters, but I may not have sampled there. Well, let's go sample there and see if they actually occur there first. But also TWRA, TVA, whoever ends up making the conservation decisions for the species, they will ultimately do it once I'm gone. Like, well, we need to go reintroduce this species in, North Fork Holston River or something like that, where historically they occurred, and I went to sample there, but we were unable to observe any sickle darters up there.
Okay.
So I personally won't be able to be a part of that, which I'll follow it. Don't
Sure.
get me wrong.
So your research is directly contributing to whether this species gets listed.
Yeah, pretty much. Oddly enough, next week I'm actually meeting with the species status assessment team, and we're going to sit down and we're each given chapters for the species status assessment of the sickle darter. to review, and kind of we're all sitting down and making sure we have everything fine-tuned of what we need to say and kind of what we know about the species to submit to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service so they can hopefully make the best decision for the species. But my data is going to help contribute to, what's ultimately determined for that species.
That's great. That's really fascinating. Going back to this little fish itself, what types of threats is the sickle darter facing currently?
In my analysis of the historical distribution of the species compared to what I have observed with my sampling data for the species, they had positives, they had negatives, but dams, the hydropower dams, and then the small mill dams, which a lot of them are not even in use anymore, but that has caused habitat fragmentation for these species, or for this species. And, when we find these species, a lot of times when you think of fish species, you think, the best water quality, the best kinds of habitat. Sickle darters, like, you're in some pretty nasty stuff sometimes, which is odd, but they can make do. But what we've noticed is that the habitat fragmentation appears to be one of the major threats to the species. So historically, before dams, all these dams were built in the upper Tennessee River drainage. They were pretty, what we like to think is widely distributed across these similar habitats.
Okay.
But when you put in mill dams, you separate these species so you don't have immigration and emigration in between these two populations of the species. So we like to hypothesize that's the major threat to this species.
Okay.
As far as, water quality changes, maybe, but we don't really have a lot of data to support that yet.
Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty tolerant species of...
Yeah. We were in Middle Fork Holston River, I think it was 2 summers ago, and it's right in the middle of Chilhowie, Virginia, in that town. And, you have all this runoff from concrete pavement, from parking lots and other things. Mm-hmm. And so basically everything that's thrown on the ground gets put in a river, and you're like, I don't know if this species will be there. And you find it, and you're like, well, sure enough, I guess it likes this kind of stuff.
Wow.
But, it's pretty remarkable that you can be in such what you would call bad habitat, I guess you could say, and you still find sickle darters.
That's interesting. They are very tolerant, I guess.
Yeah.
I also read in the paper that you sent me that it's easier to find these fish while snorkeling rather than seining or electroshocking.
Yeah, as far as fisheries research goes, or sampling streams and rivers, the standard is to, use minnow seines or seining, but also use backpack electrofishing, and most times with those in tandem with one another, where you backpack electrofish down into a seine. And so ideally, all fish you're looking for, you could find via that way. But because sickle darters are kind of semi-pelagic, where a lot of darters are benthic, you find them on the bottom, so that makes them easier to sample via shocking or seining. Sickle darters, I like to call them escape artists, because we've gone snorkeling and we'll observe one, and we'll put a marker down in the stream so we can come back later and try to get it via shocking or seining, and you go right through that habitat, and you'll get other fish, but you won't get sickle darters. But also we've gone and we've shocked and seined certain habitats at certain sites. We won't get sickle darters. Well, then we'll put, we try to do that first and cool off, I guess you could say, by snorkeling. And we'll go snorkeling and look at the same habitat, and we'll find sickle darters. So it's pretty impressive that that's the best way to observe the presence or absence of sickle darters.
Beyond contributing to the listing status of this species, what do you hope comes out of this research that you've been doing for 3 years?
Yeah, prior to coming to UT and doing this research, I did not have a lot of experience snorkeling. I've done it a time or two, but it really sheds light on how sometimes we might have to change our sampling methods to increase our detection rates or our probability of detecting a species at the highest rate, so we can make sure we're collecting the kind of data we need to answer the research question we're trying to answer. But also, I hope, with building an ecological niche model for the species, I really hope that other researchers kind of utilize the application of ecological niche modeling to, these species of greatest conservation need, and how they might contribute to future conservation measures for these species. Like I said, ecological niche model predicts the probability of suitable habitat. On a scale of, statistics, ecological niche modeling is relatively new, 15, 20 years old. It really started in, birds and amphibians, and it's just now trickling over to, the fishery side of things. I like to think we're doing a good job, and hopefully other researchers will appreciate ecological niche modeling and see how you can apply it to, predicting distributions of these species. And I'm not going to say it's going to be the best one, but it's another good example to use and reference when you're designing other studies to assess other distributions of species of greatest conservation need.
Great. So this could be contributing to scientific data collection as a whole.
Yeah, in my opinion, when you always do research, you like to think that what you're doing will contribute to scientific data collection, that you're doing some good and somebody will benefit, whether it be the species or researchers in the future,
Right.
based off what you're doing. So I like to think we're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Are there any last words you'd like to say about your research, or is there anything that you'd like to leave with people?
Yeah, I would say, a lot of people, they spend time around water bodies, rivers, streams, or lakes. But, a lot of times people just see fish darting around or swimming. They think they're all minnows and shiners, which, even I thought that when I was a little kid because I didn't know any better. But now that, I've gone through school and I've learned, like, there are so many different kinds of species, darters, minnows, sculpins, and shiners, I would tell people, just so you can open your eyes to, I'm going to call it the aquatic world, go snorkeling sometime. I mean, you can get, a goggle and a snorkel for fairly cheap, but just stick your head in the water and you'll be amazed at what you can see. Not only fish, but mussels, crayfish, and aquatic insect larvae. And it to me, that's one of the best things you could do is just observe kind of how the aquatic ecosystem works by sticking your head in the water. But yeah, that's what I would hope people would want to do in the future. I try to tell all my friends back home, like, go do it. Like when the water's clear and the water's fairly warm, there's nothing better than that.
That's
it's
great.
basically swimming, but you're I'll call it seeing a movie while you're swimming.
That's
pretty
awesome,
much.
yeah. So you heard it here first. Go stick your head in the water. Direct from Kyler Hecke. Thanks, Kyler, for joining us. This was awesome. And I certainly learned a lot about the sickle darter because I was not familiar with this fish at all. And I'm assuming that most other people who aren't doing their dissertation on the sickle darter.
Yeah, I hope people learned as well.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And everyone who's listening, thank you for joining us. Please be sure to tune in next time. We'll speak with another grad student about research in the Department of Forestry, Wildlife, and Fisheries.